She had lived in the small town for almost 5 years. Yet people still talked about her, as if she had arrived only yesterday. Her name was Lena Hart, and she worked quietly at the feed store on the corner of the dusty main road. Most people liked her because she was polite, gentle, and never created problems. But that did not stop the town from forming stories about her. In a place where everyone knew everyone, her habit of staying distant made her a mystery people could not ignore. Lena did not dress fancy or try to draw attention. She wore simple clothes, kept her hair tied back, and walked with a quiet confidence that did not invite conversation. When someone greeted her, she responded with a soft smile. When a customer thanked her, she nodded respectfully. She was not rude, but she was not welcoming either. People said that she was hard to read, and maybe that was true. Even she sometimes found it hard to understand herself. Over the years, many men in the town had tried to win her interest. Some approached her shyly, others with confidence. A few brought flowers, a few offered rides home after work, and one even asked her directly in front of half the town if she would consider marrying him someday. She refused every single one of them, always politely. And each refusal fed the town's curiosity even more. Some people whispered that she must think no man was good enough. Others claimed she was waiting for a rich man from some faraway city. A few said she was secretly in love with someone from her past. Children made up stories about her being a princess hiding from danger. Adults were more cruel. They said she had a broken heart she never spoke about. The truth was much simpler and much more painful than any rumor. Lena had grown up in a home where shouting was normal and kindness was rare. Her mother stayed in a difficult marriage for too many years, hoping things would change. They never did. Lena remembered nights when she wished she could run away, mornings when her mother cried quietly at the table, and long afternoons when she hid outside just to avoid hearing arguments. Watching that kind of life had shaped her heart in a way no one else could see. She grew up telling herself that she would only marry a man if she felt truly safe, respected, and understood. And because she had never felt that with anyone, she simply kept saying no. Her small rental cabin on the edge of town was her safe place. It was old, a little crooked, and the roof sometimes made noises at night when the wind blew hard. But she liked it because it was hers, her own space where no one shouted, no one controlled her, and no one expected her to live a certain way. She made tea in the evenings, watered the little plants she kept on the windowsill, and watched the sunset alone. She often told herself that she did not mind the loneliness, yet a quiet ache filled her heart on many nights. She tried to ignore it. Work at the feed store was simple. Each day she lifted bags of grain, arranged tools on shelves, helped customers find what they needed, and swept the floor during quiet hours. It was physical work, but she liked it because it kept her busy and allowed her mind to rest. Some customers tried to talk to her too much, but she always kept a respectful distance. She was grateful her boss, Mr. Jacobs, never pressured her to socialize more. He understood she preferred calm to gossip. One warm afternoon, while she was stacking hay bundles near the entrance, she overheard two local women speaking about her. They stood only a few steps away, talking as if she were not there. She turned down another proposal last week, the first woman said. That makes 12 now. I was 12, the other replied. What is she waiting for? A hero riding out of the sky? They laughed, and Lena pretended not to hear, though their words stung. She did not blame them for talking. People talked about everything in this town. Still, the reminder that everyone saw her refusals as something strange made her chest tighten. She wished she could tell them that fear was not pride, and caution was not arrogance. But she never explained herself to anyone. Later that evening, after closing the store, Lena walked home slowly along the dusty path leading to her cabin. The sky had turned orange and pink, and the warm breeze carried the scent of dry grass. She liked these quiet walks. They gave her time to think, though sometimes thinking brought more heaviness than peace. She thought about her life, about the men she had said no to, about the loneliness she tried not to feel, about the future she could not picture. Her life was calm, but it was also incomplete. She wanted a home one day, not just a roof, but a place of comfort and belonging. She wanted a partner one day, not someone who demanded things from her, not someone who tried to own her, but someone who understood why she feared choosing the wrong man. Someone who made her feel safe without having to prove anything. Someone who made her breathe easier, not hold her breath. But she had never met such a person. She reached her cabin, unlocked the door, and stepped inside. The room was quiet, except for the soft ticking of an old clock she had found at a yard sale. She made herself tea, sat near the window, and watched the horizon. She wondered if somewhere far away, there existed a man who would not treat her like a puzzle or a prize. She wondered if she would ever meet someone who asked the right questions, not the wrong ones. The next morning, Lena returned to work early. She swept the porch while waiting for the first customers. The town felt extra quiet that day, and she liked it. She hoped the day would pass without questions or rumors. She hoped no one would try to test her patience in the name of helping her find a husband. Little did she know that miles away, on a large ranch stretching across open land, a wealthy cowboy named Caleb Morgan was preparing for his own trip into town. He was a quiet man too, though for very different reasons. He had more land than most ranchers, more horses than he needed, and more responsibilities than he ever asked for. People respected him, but few knew the loneliness he carried. And while Lena swept the porch in silence, Caleb mounted his horse and began a ride that would, without either of them realizing it, bring their lives together in a way no rumor, no whisper, and no fear could stop. But for now, Lena knew nothing of that. She only knew her little world, her small cabin, her work at the store, and the heavy expectation people placed on her shoulders. She lived one careful day at a time, not knowing that someone who understood the weight of silence was already heading her way. In the stillness of that morning, she felt a strange calm, as if something in the air had shifted just slightly. She could not name the feeling, so she brushed it aside and continued her work. By evening, the rumors would continue. The sun would set the way it always did, and the town would go on as usual. But her story had already begun to move in a new direction quietly, slowly, without warning. Her life of saying no to every man was about to meet someone who didn't ask the usual question. Someone who saw beyond the rumors, beyond the silence. Someone who would ask her the one thing she never expected to hear. Caleb Morgan was known across the region as the quiet, wealthy cowboy who never bragged about what he owned. People respected him, not because of his money, but because of his steady nature. He spoke only when needed, treated everyone fairly, and never acted above anyone. Even so, many people whispered about him too. They said he was hard to approach, too serious, too private, and too focused on his work. But Caleb didn't care what people thought. He cared about honesty, hard work, and peace, 3 things he protected like treasures. His ranch sat in a wide valley surrounded by rolling hills. At sunrise, light fell across the fields in long, golden lines, and the sound of horses echoed from the barns. Workers greeted him each morning, and he replied with a quiet nod. He checked fences, fed horses, looked over cattle, and made sure every worker had what they needed. By noon, he usually rode across the far edges of his land, making sure everything was in order. Although he lived alone, he never rushed anything. He believed that land and animals both needed patience. But behind all that calm strength lay a deep emptiness that no one saw. His parents had passed away when he was young, leaving him with the ranch and a weight he had carried for years. He never complained. He never asked for help. He simply grew up faster than he should have. And while people admired him for building the ranch into something big and successful, They never noticed the silent loneliness that followed him everywhere. Over the years, several women had been introduced to him, some through family friends, some through neighbors who tried to help him settle down. Yet every meeting felt forced. The women were polite, kind even, but none of them understood him. Many admired the size of his ranch or his quiet confidence, but none saw beyond it. None asked how he felt, or what he dreamed of. And Caleb was not the kind of man who opened his heart without trust. So he learned to stop expecting anything from those introductions. He thanked the people who tried to help him. But inside, he knew he would wait for someone who felt right. Not perfect. Not impressive. Just honest and calm. Someone who understood silence without being afraid of it. One afternoon, he came into town for supplies. The day was warm, and the streets were busy with wagons and horses. He tied his horse near the general store and walked inside to buy tools and medicine for his animals. He greeted a few familiar faces, moved down the aisles without hurry, and paid quietly. As he walked out, he overheard two women talking near the water pump. They spoke with excitement, as if sharing breaking news. "She refused the farmer again," one woman said. Caleb didn't know whom they meant, but the other woman replied quickly, "Of course she did. She refuses every man. That girl doesn't want a husband. Or maybe she's waiting for something special," the first woman whispered. "Special?" The second laughed. "She'll end up alone, if she keeps saying no to every decent offer." Caleb usually ignored gossip, but something about the tone of their conversation held his attention for a moment. He didn't like how easily people judged others for choosing differently. He had been judged before too, first for being alone, then for being too quiet, and later for not marrying even though he was wealthy. People always saw the surface, never the truth underneath. He stepped away from the women and walked toward his horse. But the conversation stayed in his mind. A woman who said no to every man. A woman who didn't settle. A woman strong enough to refuse without fear. He didn't know why. But the idea intrigued him, not because she rejected people, but because she had the courage to choose her own path. That kind of heart was rare. Caleb returned to his ranch that evening, yet the thought stayed. He didn't even know her name. He only knew there was someone in that little town who didn't bend under pressure. Someone who held her ground in a world that constantly pushed women into choices they didn't want. He respected that without even seeing her face. The next week, Caleb sent his workers home early after a long morning of labor. He rode out alone to a distant part of his land where wild horses often wandered. He watched them for a while, admiring their freedom and strength. As the sun set, he realized how long it had been since he felt a real connection with another person. Ranch life gave him purpose, but not companionship. He had spent so many years building his land and taking care of others that he had forgotten what it felt like to be truly understood. Late that evening, while sitting on his porch with a cup of coffee, he remembered the whispers he heard in town. He wondered again, what kind of woman refused every man? Was she hurt before? Was she cautious? Or was she simply waiting for a home that felt safe, the way he longed for someone who understood silence? A week later, Caleb needed new ropes, tools, and horse feed, so he planned another trip to town. He saddled his horse at sunrise and rode at an easy pace. The morning air was cool, carrying the scent of wildflowers and dust. As he neared the feed store, he noticed a young woman sweeping the porch quietly. She moved with calm steps and didn't look up when he approached. He tied his horse outside and stepped into the store. The moment he entered, he saw the same woman arranging items on a shelf. Her face was peaceful, her movements steady, her expression thoughtful. She did not try to impress anyone. She did not rush. She simply worked with quiet focus. And Caleb felt something familiar in her calmness. Something he felt in himself. He asked her politely where the ropes were kept. She pointed him toward the back with a gentle voice. There was no excitement in her tone. No nervousness. No forced friendliness. just honesty and respect. He thanked her, and she nodded silently. He found everything he needed and brought the items to the counter. When she rung up his purchases, she still didn't look at him long. But Caleb watched her carefully, not in a strange way, but in a thoughtful one. He noticed the tiredness behind her eyes, the worry she tried to hide, and the quiet strength in her calm posture. He wondered if she was the same woman people whispered about. Something about her matched the stories, a kindness mixed with distance, a courage mixed with fear. When he stepped outside the store, he felt a strange pull in his heart. He did not know her, but her silence spoke louder than most people's words. He had met many women before, but none carried themselves the way she did. None made him curious the way she did. She wasn't trying to impress him, yet her simplicity impressed him more than anything. That night, after returning home, he found himself thinking about her again. He wondered what her story was, why she avoided attention, why she refused proposals, why she seemed to carry invisible scars. He wasn't interested in gossip. He was interested in truth. Caleb was not a man who chased people. He believed that if something was meant to happen, it would happen naturally. But something in his heart told him that the quiet woman at the feed store had walked into his life for a reason. Maybe fate was finally giving him a chance to meet someone who understood silence, someone who didn't want loud promises or grand actions, someone who wanted honesty the same way he did. For the first time in many years, the wealthy cowboy felt a small spark inside a gentle curiosity, a quiet hope. He didn't know her name yet, but he knew he wanted to cross paths with her again. The following week brought small changes neither of them noticed at first. Caleb found himself riding into town more often than usual. He told himself he needed rope, nails, medicine for the horses, or extra grain. Some of it was true, but even he knew deep inside that he was hoping to see the quiet woman from the feed store again. He didn't know her name yet, but he remembered her calm voice, her steady hands, and the peaceful way she moved. There was something in her silence that reminded him of his own. Lena also felt something unusual in the air during those days. She couldn't explain it, but her mornings felt a bit lighter. Whenever she woke up, she found herself wondering if something new might happen that day. She didn't expect anything big, but she felt a small spark of curiosity in her heart, a feeling she wasn't used to. Most of her life had been predictable, careful, and cautious. But lately, she felt the slightest shift, as if life was preparing her for a gentle change. On a warm afternoon, when the sun hung high and the wind carried dust down the road, Caleb walked into the feed store again. Lena was stacking small sacks on a shelf. She turned when the door's bell rang softly, and their eyes met for a brief moment. She gave a polite nod, then returned to her work. Caleb didn't mind her quiet manners. In fact, he appreciated them. He approached the counter slowly, holding a small list he had written on a scrap of paper. "Excuse me," he said gently. "Do you have heavy-duty leather straps?" She looked up, brushed a loose strand of hair away from her cheek, and pointed toward the far side of the store. "Second shelf on the right." Her voice was soft but steady. He realized she spoke with the kind of respect people rarely showed these days. She didn't try to charm or impress. She simply answered, honestly. That alone made Caleb admire her even more. After finding the straps, he returned to the counter. She was wiping down the wooden surface, her movements slow and careful. She didn't speak unless she needed to. Instead of feeling awkward, Caleb found the silence comforting. He paid for his items. But before leaving, he did something unplanned. "Do you normally work alone?" he asked in a calm tone. She paused, not startled, not uncomfortable, just surprised someone wanted to know something real about her. "Most days, yes," she answered. "Mr. Jacobs is here sometimes, but he's older now. He trusts me with everything." He nodded slowly. "You do your work well." Lena felt a tiny warmth touch her heart. Not because he praised her, but because he said it sincerely. She wasn't used to people noticing her effort. Most people only noticed the fact that she refused proposals. "Thank you," she said softly. Caleb gave a gentle smile, then stepped outside. He didn't push the conversation further. He didn't ask strange questions. He didn't stare. And for the first time in a long while, Lena felt comfortable around someone. That evening, Mr. Jacobs came by to check the inventory. He was a kind older man who had known Lena since she moved to town. He watched her work quietly for a moment, then said, "You've been smiling more these days." Lena froze for a second, not expecting anyone to notice. "I didn't realize," she said with a shy laugh. Mr. Jacobs smiled knowingly. "Life has a way of bringing people together when the time is right." She didn't respond. She didn't want to encourage any wrong guesses. But deep inside, she wondered if the elderly man was seeing something she had not admitted yet. The next morning, Lena arrived early again. She swept the porch while the sky still carried hints of dawn. As she worked, she heard the soft rhythm of a horse approaching. She turned and saw Caleb riding down the road with a calm, steady posture. He didn't look rushed. He didn't look excited. He looked like a man who was simply comfortable being where he was. When he reached the store, he dismounted gently and tied the reins. "Good morning," he said in a low voice. "Good morning," she replied, slightly more confident this time. He held a wooden crate of apples in one hand. "These are from my ranch." Thought Mr. Jacobs could use them. It was a small act of kindness, but it meant more than he knew. People rarely gave gifts without expecting something in return. But Caleb didn't ask for anything. He just placed the crate near the door. "That's very thoughtful," Lena said quietly. He nodded and stepped back, giving her space. He didn't push conversation. He simply stood there for a brief moment, watching the sunrise cast a golden glow over the shop's porch. "Beautiful morning," he said. She followed his gaze toward the horizon. "Yes, it is." For a long moment, neither spoke, yet the silence felt gentle, not heavy. It was the kind of silence shared by two people who didn't need to fill the air with unnecessary words. Over the next few days, they crossed paths again and again. Sometimes he came for supplies. Sometimes he rode by just to check the road conditions near town. Other times, he walked in without any particular reason. Each meeting was simple, but each one added a new thread to the quiet connection forming between them. One afternoon, Lena was struggling to lift a heavy sack of grain. She tried twice, but her strength was fading. Before she could try again, Caleb stepped behind her and spoke gently. "Let me help." She stepped aside, and he lifted the sack with ease. He didn't show off. He didn't make her feel weak. He simply helped because it was natural to him. "Thank you," she said softly. "You don't have to carry everything alone," he replied. The words touched her deeper than he knew. She had carried everything alone for so long, her fears, her memories, her responsibilities, her decisions. Hearing those words from someone like him made her feel seen in a way she hadn't felt in years. Later that evening, as the store grew quiet, Caleb was about to leave when he paused at the door. He turned back toward her with a thoughtful expression. "May I ask you something?" he said. She looked at him carefully, unsure what he would say. "People in town talk too much," he began honestly. "But I don't believe rumors. I prefer truth. So I'd like to ask, what do you truly want?" She didn't answer right away. No one had ever asked her a question like that, not in a real way. Before she could gather her thoughts, Caleb continued. Not accusingly, not boldly, but calmly. "Do you want a husband? Or just a home?" The store fell silent. Lena felt the question touch her heart in a place she had avoided for years. He didn't ask if she wanted him. He didn't ask why she refused men. He didn't ask anything unfair. Instead, he asked something true, something gentle, something that reached the core of her fear. She looked at him with soft eyes, unsure how to respond. Caleb didn't rush her. He didn't expect an answer. He simply said, "You don't have to tell me now. Or ever. I just wanted you to know. Someone sees more than the rumors." Then he stepped outside slowly, mounted his horse, and left with the same calm dignity he always carried. Lena watched him ride away until he disappeared down the dusty road. Her heart felt heavy, but not in a painful way. It felt full of a question she had been running from for too long. He had spoken gently, respectfully, and without pressure. And somehow, that made the question even more powerful. For the first time in years, she didn't feel judged. She felt understood. That night, as she sat by her window with a cup of tea, her thoughts circled around his words. She realized something she had never admitted even to herself. She didn't just want a home. She also wanted someone who saw her clearly. And Caleb Morgan had just done that. That night was different from every night before. Lena tried to sleep, but Caleb's gentle question kept echoing in her mind. "Do you want a husband? Or just a home?" It was not the kind of question a man asked to impress someone. It was not a trick. It was not a pressure. It was simply honest. So honest that it reached the deepest part of her heart. She sat at her small table with a warm cup of tea, staring at the wooden floor, while thoughts circled like quiet birds in her mind. She remembered her mother's tired face, the long arguments at home, the promises that were never kept. She remembered the fear she carried when she saw relationships fall apart. She remembered why she always refused proposals, because she wanted safety, not sorrow. But Caleb's words had opened a door inside her she didn't know still existed. When he spoke, she had not felt fear. She had felt calm. And that calmness stayed with her long after he left. The next morning, the sunlight felt brighter than usual. She woke early, dressed slowly, and walked to the feed store with a silent heaviness mixed with hope. Her steps felt different, as if something inside her had shifted during the night. Even the familiar dusty road felt new, as if life itself was beginning again. By the time she opened the store, she found herself glancing down the road more than once. She didn't expect him to appear, but part of her hoped he would. She wasn't ready to talk yet, but she wanted to see him, even from far away, just to know that the question he asked still lived between them. Hours passed. Customers came and went. Mr. Jacobs arrived for a while, checked the inventory, then left early. Lena tried to focus on her work, but her thoughts kept drifting toward the rancher, who spoke to her with more honesty than anyone else had. By late afternoon, she stepped outside to breathe. The sky was turning soft orange, and the warm breeze brushed her face. She stood quietly, thinking about her life, her long loneliness, her quiet fears, her hidden hopes. Suddenly, she heard the distant sound of hooves. She turned her head slightly, not wanting to appear too eager. A few seconds later, she saw him. Caleb rode down the dusty road with a calm posture, his hat low, his eyes focused ahead. He wasn't rushing. He wasn't avoiding her either. He simply came toward the store like he always did, quiet, steady, sincere. When he reached the porch, he dismounted slowly and tied his horse to the post. He looked at her with the same gentle respect he always carried. "Good evening," he said. "Good evening," she replied, feeling her heart beat a little faster. He didn't mention the question from yesterday. He didn't look expectant. Instead, he looked at her with a calm patience that made her feel safe. After a moment of silence, he handed her a small paper bag. "I brought something," he said. She accepted it carefully and opened it. Inside was a small loaf of fresh bread. She looked up, surprised. My cook baked it this morning, he explained. Thought you might like some. Lena felt warmth spread across her heart. Not because of the bread, but because it was such a simple, kind gesture. He didn't come with flowers or expensive items. He brought something real, something thoughtful. Thank you, she said softly. You're welcome. He paused and added, May I stay for a moment? She nodded. They both sat on the porch steps, leaving a respectful space between them. For a while, they just watched the sunset. The sky turned deeper shades of orange, then red, then purple. Neither felt the need to speak. It was a silence filled with comfort, not distance. After a few minutes, Lena gathered her courage. Her hands trembled slightly, but her voice stayed steady. I thought about your question, she said quietly. Caleb didn't turn sharply or react with surprise. He simply looked at her gently, inviting her to continue but not pushing her. She took a slow breath. I don't know what I want exactly, but I know what I don't want. I don't want pressure. I don't want demands. I don't want fear. I don't want a life like the one my mother lived. Her voice shook, and Caleb listened carefully, every word sinking into him. I want safety, she continued. I want respect. I want peace. I want a place where I can breathe, and someone who understands that I'm slow to trust. The breeze moved her hair gently across her cheek. She brushed it aside, feeling her heart open for the first time in many years. Caleb nodded slowly. You deserve all of that, he said softly. She looked at him with unsure eyes. And you? He looked toward the horizon for a moment, then spoke with quiet honesty. I want what you want. I want a home that feels warm, not loud. I want someone who understands calmness. Someone who doesn't need big promises or fast answers. His voice deepened slightly, filled with truth. I don't want someone perfect. I want someone real. Lena felt her chest tighten gently with emotion, an emotion that felt both new and familiar. Caleb hesitated for a second, then added, I'm not asking you for anything today. I only want you to know that, whatever you're looking for, I'm willing to walk beside you, at your pace. His words were like soft hands supporting her heart. Not pushing, not dragging, just holding gently. For a long moment, Lena couldn't speak. She felt tears gather at the corners of her eyes, not from sadness, but from relief. She wiped them quickly before they fell. Thank you, she whispered. Caleb smiled softly. There's no hurry. There never will be. They sat together until the sun dipped behind the hills. The peaceful quiet between them grew stronger than any spoken promise. The following days flowed gently. Caleb visited again, sometimes with apples, sometimes with nothing. Sometimes he spoke a little, sometimes he just helped with lifting heavy bags. He never overstepped. He never tried to force anything. Lena, in return, opened up, slowly. She told him about her plants, her small cabin, her dreams of growing a garden someday. He listened with real interest, encouraging her without making her uncomfortable. One day, he invited her to visit his ranch. Not as a decision, not as a commitment, just as a chance for her to see where he lived. If you ever want to, he said softly. A week later, Lena accepted. That morning, Caleb rode into town with 2 horses his and a gentle brown mare for her. He helped her onto the saddle with respectful space, making sure she felt safe. Then they rode side by side toward the wide valley. She felt nervous at first, but the closer they got to his land, the calmer she became. The ranch was beautiful. Open fields, tall fences, strong barns, and horses running free across the hills. The sight made her heart loosen in a way she had never experienced. Caleb slowed his horse near the main house and said, "This is where I live. It's not grand, but it's honest." She looked around with quiet wonder. It's peaceful, she said. Very peaceful. That single word, peaceful, meant more to him than any compliment he had ever received. He showed her the garden, the stables, the porch where he drank his morning coffee. Everywhere they went, he stayed close enough for comfort, but far enough to give her space. She noticed that he treated his animals with kindness, his workers with respect, and his land with care. Everything about him reflected the same quiet, steady heart he had shown her from the beginning. When he walked her back to town that evening, the air felt different between them, softer, warmer, ready for something new. At the edge of the road, before she stepped off the horse, she looked at him with clear eyes. "I think," she said slowly, "I think I want both." "Refor?" Caleb tilted his head slightly. "Both? A husband and a home. But only if it feels like this. Respectful. Calm. Honest." Honest. He didn't rush forward or celebrate too loudly. Instead, he breathed out gently, and a warm smile touched his face. "We'll build it together," he said simply. Not a promise made in excitement. A promise made in truth. In the months that followed, their bond grew slowly and beautifully. Lena learned to trust again. Caleb learned to open his heart. And together, they created the calm, loving home they both had longed for. She was no longer the woman who refused every man. She became the woman who finally found the right one. A man who didn't ask her to hurry. A man who didn't ask her to pretend. A man who asked the question that changed everything.